we either think of places like, the cemeteries that we pass by in our neighborhoods, and they are often, as Julie pointed out, overgrown. They're underappreciated. They may even be locked and inaccessible. And here was the Warren Ferris Cemetery, which had had an archaeological investigation before they developed that neighborhood by SMU. And it transformed the landscape there, and then the archaeology actually allowed for a lot of those non-native species to thrive in that environment, because they had taken out they didn't anticipate this, but when they did that archaeological excavation and they developed that area, they took out a lot of the native species and the original prairie grasses that would have existed there. And so, thinking about historic places, it's not just about the bricks and mortar or the headstones in this case. It's also about the landscape. So Julie has this immense passion for restoring the landscape. And she says, I just am not sure how to handle the monument component of it. Here at Warren Ferris, we've lost our headstones, but as we look at other historic cemeteries in the area, how do we deal with those monuments? I mean, there's stories in them, right? And so it began this great collaboration between Preservation Dallas and Constellations of Living Memorials, which is related to the Warren Ferris Cemetery project. So with Preservation Dallas, in about 2015, we had a large project at McCree Cemetery in Lake Highlands. Anyone live over by Adelia and Church or Walnut Hill area? There is a cemetery hidden behind a state lane. And it's actually two cemeteries. It's the cemetery that is associated with the hamlet of Aldelia and Rogers, and the other hamlet of Little Egypt, which was a freedmen community. And so long after the neighborhoods evolved in that area into what we see today, this cemetery exists there that reflects that original history, that early development of the area. And so there's so many stories to be told from that cemetery. Anyway, we at Preservation Dallas worked with a foundation who had a special interest in preserving the cemetery, and we started with documenting it, doing an archaeological survey, because there's a lot of unmarked graves. And so we were trying to determine where the unmarked graves were located. Are they, what are the challenges with having such a large expanse of unmarked graves, is that you will find that developers come in and say there's no bodies here. This is just a few remnants of headstones. So it can be developed. And if you've ever gone by Northwest Highway, right by between Lemon and I think it's Cochrane Heights, there's the Garvin Cemetery, and you will see a for sale sign in front of it. Literally, for sale. And it is a situation where someone quitclaimed the cemetery, convinced a Dallas County judge that there was no cemetery there anymore. And it is now available for sale. Now, mind you, it has not sold. It's been on sale for a long time. And there was an archaeological survey completed. What Preservation Dallas and other community members did was put a historic overlay zoning on top of that cemetery. We created a landmark designation, and that landmark designation actually protects the historic cemetery and requires any developer who purchased that property to actually go through and do the archaeology. Mind you, archaeology is incredibly expensive, right? Just ask Texas Department of Transportation after the Freedman Cemetery project. You're talking thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars, and it probably would exceed the value of that property. So while you can't do a taking from somebody, you can't make the barrier so far that it loses the, you're prohibiting their development because of our state laws regarding property owner rights. But you can require them to do the right thing. So Julie was interested in this process. We had done it at McCree Cemetery because of all those unmarked graves and because we wanted to honor the people buried there. Another wonderful thing that was accomplished at McCree Cemetery is that we had a number of college students during the pandemic out there cleaning the headstones and doing historical research and documentation. And some of those students they came from Dallas College, so of diverse backgrounds. Some of them had never really experienced anthropology in a hands-on way. When you give students an opportunity to find things, like, little dolls. We find broken pieces of dolls in front of children's graves all the time. Sometimes it's just everyday tools, things that you might have at home, but having them look up this business, their maker's mark, and they're like, oh, this is great, I can find out about this company, and this tells me when it was made, and so I know more about the dates, and of course we knew the dates because of headstones, but it's a finding process. You're making history tactile to them, convincing them that sometimes Google does not tell you everything. Going back to the original Amazon here. So, with Constellations of Living Memorials and Preservation Dallas, we're now doing a study at Western Heights Cemetery, which you might know because Clyde Barrow is buried there. And it's over in West Dallas. And we had a group of students out there cleaning headstones, over 300 of them this summer. They've been doing research and doing documentation. They've got a database that they've added to that the Cemetery Association had already put together. And from that information, all of those birth dates and death dates, they learned valuable lessons. They learned things like, the Spanish flu. They learned about when the Great Depression happened and what was the cost of the Great Depression. Looking at homemade headstones, looking at multiple family members who died in a row during the Depression because of those hardships. They can now have a greater appreciation for the history of Dallas. They're making connections that they may not have ever made before. They're exposed to how history can impact our community and how the native landscape can really enhance our environment. So they're learning how to transform place. They're learning how to appreciate place. And they're just gaining so much value that we're seeing these students involved in these projects going on to get their bachelor's degree from their associates, going on and having interest in getting their master's degree. We have one young lady who spent the summer at Western Heights who said, my family has always been barbers, hairstylists, restaurant workers, things like that. And I'd never really met a scientist. And now I'm a scientist. And I'm going to get my master's degree eventually. And I want to do this. And so, the Constellations of Living Memorials program has so many wonderful outcomes. And just like the map at the beginning here that Julie had, where it's not only just the native landscape, but it's the historic place, valuing historic place, valuing the culture, the people that are reflected by that place, and then using it as an enriching teaching opportunity so that our students can appreciate a cemetery, can see it in a different light, and learn about the environment, as well as gain valuable insight in how to become an expansive thinker, because they've got the tools now to think about objects differently and to make interpretations and connections to those objects. So I really appreciate you giving me an opportunity to speak. Please feel free to connect with Constellation of Living Memorials and Preservation Dallas. We have a cemetery tour at Preservation Dallas and Constellation of Living Memorials this weekend on Saturday. So call Preservation Dallas. We'd be happy to get you on the cemetery tour. So thank you.
Victoria, can you share with the group the study that is now being formulated into an actual
educational
yes,
curriculum?
through our partnership?
So we are developing educational curriculum for students in the community college system. And it is a science-based curriculum that will use birth and death dates and help students connect historical events and changes in mortality over time with real data from these cemeteries. So, you know, learning how to create charts, learning about the Spanish flu, and learning about how to interpret information from a historic cemetery and apply it in a kind of in a science lesson, so that they can really connect that history and that science component of, like, you know, for example, very quickly, is that a lot of Dallas health statistics tell us that as 1870, when the arrival of the railroads, we start to see a bump in the number of physicians in the area, and all of a sudden life expectancy increases. Then we have city ordinances that prohibit animals from running free and fouling in water sources. And so all of a sudden, and paving of streets, all these things have an impact on mortality. And so if you give a student the history, and then you tell them about the mortality and have them make those connections, it's a great thing. So, thank you.
Thank you, Victoria.
Thank you.